China lost 42 soldiers in the June 2020 Galwan Valley clash, at least 9 times more than the 4 it has acknowledged. That's a report quoted by the Australian newspaper, The Klaxon. It has appeared in The Klaxon. The investigative piece by Anthony Clan, the editor of The Klaxon, who joins us now, is based on the work of a group of social media researchers who've been able to unearth a sustained effort by Chinese officials to bury the truth on what really happened in the Galwan Valley. Remember, India lost 20 soldiers. The number was officially acknowledged, as is always the case. But there have always been questions on whether the casualty count announced by China of 4 killed in action was at all accurate. According to The Klaxon, it was not. Joining us now, Anthony Clan. Thanks, Anthony, very much for being with us. You know, lots of interesting bits in your article, the first of 2. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of quotes and then let's talk about it. First up, the article says, evidence provided by a group of social media researchers, which the Klaxon has independently built on, appears to support claims that China's casualties extended well beyond the 4 soldiers named by Beijing. What exactly have these social media researchers unearthed?
So the social media researchers have been working for about a year on this. They've uncovered quite a number of points. The key point being there were many more Chinese soldier deaths than has been reported or claimed by China. Of course, as you mentioned before, there are a couple of other points also. There were, in fact, 2 clashes. There have been Chinese media reports that have conflated the 2. There was one altercation that occurred, this is on June 6, 2020, yep. And then there was the June 15 altercation in which we saw the casualties, the many casualties. So at the nub of it, there was the battle, or the confrontation, the deadly confrontation came about regarding a temporary bridge that Indian soldiers had erected over a stream of the Galwan Valley in order to allow them to pass to inspect Chinese installations in the buffer zone. So there's a buffer zone. The agreement was that neither party would install infrastructure in the buffer zone. So what's occurred is India's built this temporary bridge to inspect what China's doing in the region, or doing in the buffer zone. Now, China's allegedly building infrastructure, putting up tents, building dugouts, and having large machinery in the area. So the confrontation on June 6th involved several hundred soldiers. There was no deaths. It was more of a confrontation than a major scuffle. But officers of each side of the debate made an agreement, or allegedly made an agreement, in order to fuse the situation. So infrastructure of each side would be removed. Now, what's happened that we've managed to ascertain, and it's been backed up by numerous sources, is that in the interim, rather than removing its infrastructure, Chinese forces have removed this temporary bridge that India was using in order to inspect. And this has led to the June 15 conflict. So India's come across to discuss this, or to meet with Chinese soldiers and Chinese officers. Yes. And this is when the scuffle's broken out. And so that particular evening, when we've got soldiers that have come across, there was a battle. Several soldiers were killed, and in heading back across the river, this is when we're told, the evidence is that numerous or many Chinese soldiers were in fact washed away. Now, we're talking about the Galwan River at sub-zero temperatures. It's pitch black night, and there's boulders, etc. at the bottom. So this is how many of the Chinese casualties came to occur.
And we know this on the basis of what was posted on Chinese social media, which was then censored, right?
Yeah, so there's a number of sources. There's conversations with people on the ground. Right. There's Chinese media sources. Now, of particular weight is contemporaneous reports at the time of what's actually occurred. And this has sort of gone through in quite a considerable detail regarding the soldiers washed away. Adding weight to that is the fact that you have China that's gone out of its way to censor particularly any information regarding casualties from the Galwan battle that evening, Chinese side casualties. And that extends to, as we know, China came out, it said nothing for the first 8 months regarding its casualties. And then on February the 19th, it announced there were 4 deaths. Each soldier had been posthumously awarded a bravery medal. The following day, Chinese authorities announced that a prominent journalist in China had been arrested or had been sacked from his job for stating that the 4 deaths wasn't correct. In fact, it was much, much higher. So that's sending out a signal for people, for others to...
Sure. So, Anthony, let me ask you this. The evidence now of approximately 38 odd Chinese soldiers having been washed away is based on conversations as well, which is what takes, the entire story forward in a sense. Your conversations with your sources, deemed credible sources, and of course what you've discussed or described as the efforts made by China to sort of curtail the truth coming out. And therefore you've added one and one together, and you're absolutely sure that there were 38 Chinese soldiers who went down the Galwan River and died.
We know that it's substantially more than 4 deaths. The precise figure we keep coming back to is this 38 figure. There have been higher figures put out in Indian media, up to 100 or something. One report put it higher than 100. Now, we haven't been able to confirm that. We're not saying that's not true. We can't confirm that. But the
38 is based on your conversations, am I right?
The 38, yes. The 38 is based on our research from a number of sources, including the social media investigations and conversations with people on the ground, yes.
Now, the next quote from your article, it also shows extreme lengths Beijing has gone in order to silence discussion about the battle, in particular discussion about the true number of Chinese casualties. So how did it actually happen? On Weibo, Chinese social media, their version of Twitter, there was a lot of conversation, right? And there were first-person accounts as well, some of them from soldiers, or apparently from soldiers, who actually witnessed a lot of this happening. And then that was taken down.
That's correct. And of course, the fact that was taken down and with such haste, we've managed to obtain recorded records of this source data, but that it was taken down so quickly gives us another strong indication of that China's very, very eager to have this hushed up, or to not have any more debate or discussion regarding the casualties. Another interesting point is that Chinese state media has barely touched this at all. It hasn't reported on the clash in any great detail, and there's been maybe 1 or 2 minuscule reports. So China doesn't want this information coming out. Now, one of the theories is that the Chinese officer that allegedly was quite aggressive. The Indian side says that, look, they went across and discussed this with the Chinese soldiers and with the Chinese officer, and then the Chinese officer allegedly ran quite an aggressive charge and formed a battle line. So whether that officer had authority to do that remains in question. So it may be that officer did not. Yeah.
The next quote, the research report, which you've referred to in your own report, cites a year-long investigation involving discussions with mainland Chinese vloggers, information obtained from mainland-based Chinese citizens, and media reports that have since been deleted by Chinese authorities. In other words, in addition to your own effort at unearthing the truth, there has been an effort in China at compiling the truth as well, based on conversations that these researchers on social media have themselves had, right? And obviously,
yes,
it's doing that is not easy in China.
No, of course, and that comes back to the main point, is sort of piecing together what's actually happened. Given you've got the threats against people speaking out,
exactly,
that China's very clear that it doesn't want people that it's arrested the journalist. It's making it very clear that it doesn't want this information out. But on the other side, you have families whose loved ones have been killed serving their country, who are no doubt quite concerned or upset that they're not being recognised. The deceased loved ones aren't being recognised. So there's that pressure. Now, there's a line of thought that this is why China's come out 8 months after the fact. Now, it actually said it wasn't going to reveal casualties. It's its policy not to, but then it came out in February and did, February 2020, that is.
Sure.
So the query is perhaps, or the thought is that there's increasing pressure on China regarding this incident, and perhaps it thought that might take some pressure out of it.
Many Chinese soldiers, you write, were killed while attempting to cross back over the fast-flowing Galwan River in the early stages of June 15th and 16th battle. What is this based on? Is this, because this is the critical bit, what is this based on? Is it based on conversations that you have had? or stuff which you have seen which has been deleted from Chinese social media, first-hand accounts, what exactly?
Yeah, so it's first-hand accounts that's been deleted from Chinese social media. One account in particular involves a first-hand account of someone who attended a funeral of one of the people that died. Now, it's worth remembering that only one of the 4 soldiers that China has admitted died in the battle was drowned. So there's a report particularly regarding this incident, and this soldier has pushed at least four other people across the river and then become stuck in the river. And this is when many other people also were swept away.
All right, let's just bring up some satellite imagery of the area that we are actually talking about so that I can just explain this to our viewers and then come back to this conversation. What you're actually seeing is that bend of the Galwan River, and this is a little bit further afield. But this is where the Chinese built up their construction after the clashes actually took place. These are areas where the Chinese were trying to construct a road. This is where they've built up further afield some of their tents, their storage huts, and their huts for their soldiers, tents for their soldiers. And it was in this area across the fast-flowing river, within about 300 meters of this area that you're actually seeing on your screen, where the fighting actually took place. These are images that we procured from Maxer and from Planet Labs. And this is, let's have this up full screen. This is the exact location, in fact, in Ladakh, where this took place. So on the left-hand side is actually is a river which then leads into the Blue River, which is the Galwan River itself. The site of the clash is near a Y bend of the river, very close to the line of actual control. So this is where it actually took place. I'll just come back to the next quote from your article. Again, quoting that research report, which said that comrades in arms kept slipping and being rushed downstream. The one question I have about this is, if they were in the water and you know it's a fast-flowing river, then how come none of these bodies actually ended up on the Indian side?
Well, this is the thing. Now, we know the following day of the battle there was a ceasefire and there was a truce for each side to collect their wounded or their fallen. And we have actually information, we haven't been able to confirm that yet, but we have from a couple of sources that there were actually retrievals occurring on the Indian side, because that's the way the river flows the following day, involving helicopters. But we haven't been able to firm that up with the Indian military. So, but that would be consistent with the flow of the river. Yes, we've considered that.
The next quote, according to a Weibo user, Elias Kiang, who claims to have served in the area, the PLA was creating infrastructure in this buffer zone, violating the mutual agreement, and had been trying to expand its patrolling limits within the buffer zone since April 2020. You've spoken about this. But I think it's interesting that there were actually soldiers, and this has been reported in the past as well, who actually got on to social media in China and started talking about what exactly was happening. So these were first-hand accounts, and these accounts which were pulled down because they could have caused a great deal of damage if they haven't already.
Indeed, and I believe it makes sense. The follow-on logic from that makes sense. That's why China, the following day, immediately on February 20, came out and announced that the prominent Chinese journalist had lost their job, and it was elsewhere reported that he'd been arrested by Chinese authorities. So they made quite a deal of this, and they were obviously quite concerned about that and it coming out at the time. The Chinese reporter was quite direct and forceful in saying what had occurred. So yes, the numerous factors, but particularly this focus on quietening down any discussion of the casualties, and the Chinese government made a point of stating that particularly goes to very much supports what we've also uncovered elsewhere.
A final quote. Let's bring up quote 8 actually. Again, quoting that research report. After the incident, the bodies of the soldiers were first taken to Shikwanhe Martyr Cemetery, followed by local ceremonies at local towns of the killed soldiers. In other words, these soldiers were in fact honored. They were honored by the military, and their mortal remains were returned to their relative villages. And that conspiracy of silence was enforced at all of these levels, right?
It's unclear as to how many of these soldiers were returned and how many of these funerals there were. We know there were definitely the 4, and there may have been some others, but the line of thought is that there also were a number that weren't actually returned and weren't acknowledged officially.
Right. And a final question to you. You've got more coming up on this story, right?
Yes, we have another story coming up on Saturday with some extra information that's come forward. So we'll be running that on Saturday.
All right, Anthony, great speaking to you. Thank you very much for joining us with that big exclusive on, as I mentioned, a conspiracy of silence. How many soldiers from China actually died? Were the claims, the official claims made by the Chinese government, accurate? It now appears on the basis of this research that that may not have been the case at all. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.